It is without a doubt the best time to be collecting die-cast model aircraft here in 2025. From the progression of 3D printing, to the resurgence of GeminiJets, to all the other manufacturers pitching in, it is truly an incredible time, and today we're going to evaluate the 1 to 400 landscape here in 2025. I hope all of you are excited for this, and without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started, everybody. It is so cool to see where the model aircraft landscape here is in 2025, and today we're going to evaluate so many contributing factors as to the why 2025 is the best time to be collecting die-cast model aircraft. I hope all of you are excited for today's video, as I'm really excited to just take a whole high-level overview of the die-cast model aircraft landscape and really get into all the components. So I hope each and every one of you are excited for this. We won't waste any further time and just go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, we need to establish what the model aircraft landscape was like really prior to 2022 is where this video is going to start. So that's exactly what we have here. So if you know, GeminiJets, GSE Wings, Phoenix, and many other companies for many years produced the die-cast model aircraft. And we obviously had Dragon Wings in the 1990s, but it's really safe to say that it was just GeminiJets, GSE Wings, Phoenix, and a few other hit or miss brands there from 2000 all the way up until really 2019 is when we saw our first new company that became prominent, of course, as we know, NG Models. But it was just really crazy to see that be the landscape for so long, and just thinking about these concepts, getting a Southwest release was rare. That's crazy to say, but it really was uncommon to get a good normal Southwest release. Not only were Southwest planes rare, but regional jets also didn't come out very often, so getting a United E145 or an American E175 was once every year or so, and that was just really weird to think about, you know, the frequency of, you know, Southwest planes, regional jets, and so forth just being so limited. And there's so many examples that we can go into, but the case in point here is that getting some of these aircraft that were very popular and very common ended up being really rare, which was really interesting. It's also very important to note that there were no additional features on airport layouts or, you know, other displays, so you didn't have many choices when it came to this. There wasn't much 3D printing, there was only a limited amount of ground service equipment, there was no interactive aircraft, there was no flaps down. It was just, you know, really confined down to, we have die-cast model aircraft, we have some jet bridges, we have some GeminiJets ground service equipment most likely, and we have a mat, and that's about it. And it's crazy to think that, you know, we went from innovating with, you know, Legos and different pieces like that, and people would use cardstock to build cargo buildings and so forth, and now we're into a whole different landscape from that. So establishing this from the beginning, getting back to like 2019 is where we're really going to start the discussion. It's really crazy to think about all the progression we've had from that into what we're going to talk about. So think about that as we talk about these next several topics. So the model aircraft landscape has completely changed over the last 6 years, and we're going to start with the big piece of the puzzle. And I think all of you know exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about next generation models, NG models, and what they have done to be a huge building block towards our community, and truly, I think, make this a priority to help other companies get their resurgence going, because, you know, when you don't have competition, you're going to be complacent, and really the other manufacturers didn't have much competition. They were complacent and just making what they wanted to. But NG Models stormed onto the scene, obviously officially started in 2017, but 2019 is really when they made their footprint known, and that was the first major building block, these high quality models. And I remember I was uploading, I think, twice weekly at this point on my channel here, and it was just really weird because I had all these Gemini models, and several of them, you know, it wasn't very common to get a new model because, you know, I already had quite a bit of what came to the airports that I was doing, and that was a huge part of my collecting at that time, was the model aircraft that came to the airports. That's what I had. But when NG came onto the scene, and, you know, we had so many videos come out during that time regarding the essentially the new battle between GeminiJets and NG models, I knew that I had to get some NG models to see what that was like. And we obviously had so many different videos come out during that time, and really it was so fascinating to take that all in. And the first NG model I got was a FedEx 757, but then shortly after I got some really cool Americans and so forth. And when I saw these aircraft for the first time, I just knew that NG was going to be a force in this community, and that's exactly what they did as they stormed onto the scene. From high quality models to aircraft that people actually wanted, NG made a huge difference for the 1 to 400 scale landscape for model aircraft collectors, and this truly was the first major building block towards succession. Or no, I'm sorry, wrong word there. First major building block towards success for the model aircraft landscape. And with that being said, it's going to be interesting to see what NG's future future is going to look like, but it's certainly worth noting that NG was a huge building block to get this momentum rolling, and finally we saw competition come out there. And for the US landscape especially, with just what continued to go on and what was considered acceptable, essentially, you know, it just happened and there wasn't any other options. Gemini was just making all these aircraft, and obviously they got into a slump, but we'll talk about that more later on. But it's certainly interesting to think that NG came onto the scene and completely changed the landscape, and that timed with the Aviation 18 video that went viral really puts the pieces together for how this all started. So NG really got the spotlight there for several years, especially in 2020 when the pandemic happened and Gemini was really on a stagnant path, and NG just stormed on and made so many aircraft that people wanted: the JetBlue 321, the United Star Alliance 738, Delta A321s, and so many other examples that really are a key cornerstone memory in my head for model aircraft collecting for so many years to come. And I just cannot not think about those times. You know, it's so important to think about what came out of that and what was, you know, the foundation there. And that's exactly what happened for the next several years as we continue to move forward. And NG took advantage of this time that Gemini dipped, and NG really made their name known, and that's why we know them now, as we'll talk about here later in the video. But as we continue to progress into 2021, Gemini finally got out of their slump, and we'll talk about that here in a couple lines. But I do want to talk about some other pieces first before we do so, and what I really want to talk about, because they happen kind of simultaneously. But first I want to establish Panda Models and what they have done since 2021. So Panda Models, if you don't know, has been a company making a limited variety of 1-400 scale aircraft, particularly some in Asia and even a handful in Europe and other continents. But in 2021, we got our first ever exclusive Panda Models, or not first ever, but first major exclusive Panda Models, including a Southwest 737, a Spirit A320, various JetBlue A320s, and exclusives started, and they're still going on to this day. But 2021's when those exclusives started, and they really made a huge difference. We have not got a Southwest 737 Heart livery to that point in like 6 years, whatever it was, 2015, so 6 years or whatever it was. But the case in point is that getting these aircraft that were high demand from these exclusive releases really made a huge difference. And not only did Panda keep doing that, but they've also now progressed into exciting new molds and have also expanded their release offerings. While they're pretty sporadic, Panda has released some really exciting aircraft for a variety of collectors. Many examples include the Delta and United 767-400s and their accompanying specials, the Allegiant Airbus A319 Las Vegas Raiders, American Airlines McDonnell MD-11, and a variety of other examples that have certainly made a huge difference on the landscape. The other cool part about Panda as well is that their aircraft are very high quality and very detailed, so you're certainly not going to be disappointed with the offerings that Panda has to offer. With that being said, on top of that, what happened when those exclusives started coming out is that GeminiJets had their resurgence in March of 2021. Feel free to refer to my GeminiJets New Era video where I go into detail on all this. But in that video, we talked in major detail about the March 2021 releases and all these new aircraft that GeminiJets started making, like the American CRJ-900, Delta CRJ-900, all the different Southwest aircraft, and obviously shortly thereafter, within a couple of years, we got Breeze Airways aircraft, and then that would eventually progress, you know, into some cool 1-200 offerings as well. We ended up getting the Antonov 225 and 1-200 scale, and a bunch of other really cool molds like the Boeing 767-400, the the E7, that's another really cool one. The C5 and 1-200 I also think debuted, along with a nice variety of molds. And most of these are really good and overall really fit the build for casual collectors. I really want to emphasize that word from the last video. I will be making a follow-up Gemini video because I know there was some interesting verbiage that I used in that, and I probably should have been a little bit more casual, but I really want to make this clear. For the casual collectors, GeminiJets' new era was game-changing. I'm not talking about down to a nose millimeter on the proportions. I'm talking about the casual perspective, okay? The casual perspective towards releases that people wanted, along with fairly good molds, if not high quality molds. For the most part, GeminiJets really made their presence known. I really just want to make that clear. With that being said, on top of the aircraft I already mentioned, over the last several years, and we talked about it in that video as well, they really got into some different types of aircraft that they'd never done before, some really cool miscellaneous ones, along with a really cool variety of modern, retro, cargo, GA, all kinds of aircraft. Many examples include the JetBlue E190 or Atlantic MD-80, the aforementioned Antonov 225, and it's an extended list of examples that we can use. It's really cool to see them progress. The Janet 736 is another one, along with just really cool Everett Air Cargo MD-80. But all of those, along with all the popular releases, they did all the Heritage American A321s, and they've also diversified really well in the international landscape. Aircraft like the Azul E195-E2 is a really good one. You can also find some other cool narrow-body offerings around the entire world, ranging from Australia with like the what's that one that I'm thinking of there? The Qantas A220s that they've done. And then you can also think about aircraft in Europe they've done, like the KLM Airbus A321neo. And several of these aircraft don't have competition for them, like the Qantas A220s. So it's really cool to see GeminiJets knocking out aircraft that have never been done before. The Azul E195 is a really good example, and we can certainly talk about that more in the next Gemini video. But I do want to make the presence known in this video that GeminiJets has made a huge contribution to the resurgence of the community. But would all of this have happened if the aforementioned items wouldn't have? Well, we have another particular element that I want to talk about, and that's the major revamp that started in 2022 for three particular companies: JC Wings, Phoenix, and Aviation 400. The first two companies, at least to me, and it could be because I started paying more attention during 2022 and so forth, it just seemed like the releases were kind of stagnant and they weren't making many new molds. Particularly Phoenix, I think, really has changed their approach to the game, because let's go ahead and talk about exactly what's going on with these companies. So the competition obviously ramped up from the aforementioned brands, so they just all kind of started going against each other. So new molds, including the Airbus A380, the Airbus A330neo, and etc., all of these really started to take place. And on top of this, you know, there were so many new liveries coming out that this made for a similar time frame with the releases for these companies. JC Wings, Aviation 400, Phoenix released like a Singapore, Malaysia, and all these different A380s within like 6 months of each other. And it was really fascinating just to watch that happen. And JC Wings, especially there with the 1-200 scale, also made a really interesting presence on it. So it's certainly really interesting to think about how all this came together, and what this meant for the community. But this also brought overlap for the other companies. NG Models did quite a bit of overlap with these companies and so forth. So it's been certainly really interesting to watch all this come together, and I think it's been really fascinating. But it's certainly been a huge faucet for the community, not only for more options for the collector, but also more availability, which is really valuable. And I think it is really cool that there's so many different options. My collection particularly, I don't have a particular graph of my distribution of manufacturers, but I can certainly say that it has diversified substantially since 2020. And that's thanks to all this competition. You know, I have a SkyTeam Delta 764 by Panda, but I have the Gemini Ron Allen livery. So it's just really cool to have all these different versions and kind of pick and choose and so forth. So I think that's really valuable, and we certainly can't take that for granted. So it's been really cool to see this, and all the companies, Aviation 400, especially with their details, been amazing. But it's been awesome to see all these companies really come onto the scene. I also want to mention that Phoenix really changed their release strategy a little bit, and they've actually started making some modern and retro United States aircraft, including the Southwest 737 MAX 8. The American MD-11 was also done, which is really cool. Delta 747, MD-11, United 747, 777, and a long list with different liveries and different variants and so forth. The case in point here is that it's really impressive to see, and it certainly gave more options for the collectors and the consumers, which is absolutely fantastic. With all this being said, not only has all of that happened, but we also have new types of model aircraft that really changed the game as well. Let's talk about those. First of which, flaps down aircraft have certainly been very popular between JC Wings and GeminiJets. I think this really does provide a nice element to the community. If you want to display your aircraft with flaps down, why shouldn't you not have that option to do so? And that's exactly what we have. And I think it's really cool and adds realism in different ways. So I'm definitely glad to see that, and I'm excited to see the progression of what we'll see with flaps down. Interactive aircraft have also been another really cool feature. I think this is especially helpful for model airport builders. I know I've been certainly have enjoyed putting my ground service equipment up with these aircraft, which we'll talk about next. But it's been really cool to have all these different miscellaneous parts and be able to show the aircraft and what it would look like when cargo's coming out or when a door's open or whatever the case is. So this has certainly been fun, and it's really cool to see interactive aircraft taking off. It's also worth noting that Aviation 400 has introduced retractable landing gear models. I think this is really cool. Dragon Wings did do quite a bit of this previously, and a couple other manufacturers, but it's really great to see this in the high quality scale, and I do really appreciate their efforts to continue to innovate their aircraft and provide options, you know, for go-arounds, or if you just wanted to display it that way. I think it's really cool. So we certainly can't take that for granted in any ways. Now, it is really important to note that 3D printing has made a huge difference to model airport builders, general aviation, military fighters, cargo, and so forth. And let's go ahead and explain that. So really, the 3D printing has really become commonplace in the model aircraft landscape since that 2020-2021 timeframe. I think everybody got some extra time from the pandemic to work on 3D printing. And what I first remember is Shapeways really kicked it off. Now, I'm sure there's a couple other companies that had 3D printing. I know the concourses particularly go back way before that. They were 3D printing those, but especially with the biz jets, the fighter jet, and so forth, Shapeways kind of kicked it off from what I remember. I remember getting several of those in 2021, and that was really cool. But since that's happened, we've had various new companies come onto the scene to full-time produce various components for 1-400 model airports and aircraft. Let's talk about companies like Jet Set Models, Tiny Tugs, Custom Airport Buildings, 3D Design Deck, Layover Layouts. I know that's a Mac company, but I'm just putting them all in this category of enhancing the model airport, and I think that's so cool. Jet Set Models making fighter jets, and obviously the biz jets that have been huge, not to mention the cool cargo equipment. I've never had a 1-400 forklift. I have 1-400 forklifts now. I think that is so cool. I never had a 1-400 GPUs. I have 1-400 GPUs now, which is amazing. I never had 1-400 passengers. I know some were produced previously, but I've never had them. Now I do. Just incredible to see. Tiny Tugs, I'm planning to buy some of their ground service equipment. I'm excited to review it. It looks really good. I like the different sizes of the catering truck, the different leveling, and obviously different pushback tugs and so forth. That's really cool. Custom Airport Buildings, you've obviously seen my different concourses that I have from them, and it's really nice to have those different options from the 3D printing landscape, and I'm excited to explore more of that as we continue to move forward. On my model aircraft Instagram page, CM Aviation Models, I am sharing a bunch of different 3D printed items that I'm finding for model airports, along with just a bunch of cool model aircraft content in general. So if you'd like to check that out, I would recommend it. But whatever I'm sharing on there, I'm definitely hopeful to get. But some of the model airports on Instagram are fantastic, by the way, along with YouTube. So huge shout out to all of you for making this community amazing. Keep it up. But definitely wanted to acknowledge that because it's very important. Let's also not forget to acknowledge the biz jets and 1-400, once again, GPUs, forklifts, cones, marshallers, all of it. It is out of this world. It's truly absolutely incredible. I also forgot to mention 3D Design Deck and Layover Layouts. I apologize. Very excited to get the NetJets Challenger 600 along with more aircraft and 3D Design Deck, Layover Layouts, amazing mats. So excited to get more of those. And any company that I didn't mention, I definitely am so excited to continue to expand my lineup. It's so exciting. We could do a video just on that, and we probably will. But for the sake of this video, we're talking about the peak here in collecting, but expect more there in the way of the 3D printing world here in the scale. So it's absolutely exciting and really cool to think about it all. And, you know, there's so many cool ways to display and, you know, have fun with your model aircraft. Think about all the grass and the ultra realistic foils that we have now with the really awesome printing technology and so forth. It is truly eye-opening and inspiring to see, and it just came so far. Like I said earlier in the video, going from Lego concourses to full 3D printed with forklifts and cones and marshallers, it's incredible, and it's so cool to see how the aircraft and airports have progressed as a result. And not to mention, another really low-key element that's definitely worth noting is new stands. NG Models made some really cool stands. I know there's been some other companies going at it too, so we definitely can't forget to recognize that as well. And then last but certainly not least, I also want to mention, you know, there's not just the 1-400 scale kicking it. The 1-200 is doing amazing. In-Flight 200 has had the best variety of releases they've ever had, which is incredible. Herpa and other companies like Hobbymaster and so forth have really done a great job with the military offerings and so forth, and I hope to cover more of that as we continue to move forward. And with all this 3D printing and all these different options and what we're seeing people capable of, I'm definitely expecting that we're going to see more of this as we continue to move forward. So it's a really exciting time. I hope all of you are excited for what's to come here on the channel. I definitely want to cover as much as possible. Obviously, my life is definitely ever evolving, so with all the different situations going on, it's going to be tough to do exactly that, but I'm very hopeful to continue to provide as much great content as I can, and the model airports will continue to progress, along with just continuing to promote all these different items and see what the landscape's all about. I will certainly do my absolute best to continue to get the footprint out there and exposure for all the brands. It's incredible to see what this community is doing right now, and there certainly has never been a better time to collect. So if you're on the fence, if you're thinking, man, I really don't know if I want to start getting into it because of the cost and so forth. It's going to be worth it at the end of the day. It is so cool. And even if you're just able to get a couple aircraft or whatever, it's certainly so worth it. So definitely get into it. Feel free to let me know what you all think in the comment section below. There's not been a better time to collect. I'm so excited for the future. Expect more videos on GeminiJets NG models and the 3D printing landscape to come here in the future. There's a bunch of exciting videos to make. All those subsections can definitely have one. But just starting here with the basics and going from there. But man, what a great time to collect. Keep getting into it. I'm so excited for some more free time to do just that myself, and I hope all of you are as well. With that being said, that'll do it for today's video, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank each and one of you for watching. My name's CM Aviation. Take it easy, everybody. Stay safe. Trust process. Do you love and love you do. My name's CM Aviation. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon as CM Aviation is signing off.